Well, I was very impressed when we did the Zoom call a few months ago. I think I already know, before even getting through today, you could teach the CDC, the EPA, a lot of medical doctors things about mixtures of chemicals that no one knows. And I had a really great meeting with Pam today, and you guys are really at the forefront of understanding with mixtures of chemicals. And I'm really excited about some potential collaboration. And what I want to do today is just give a brief outline. And also, it's going to end with Attorney Mindy Bish. She, you know, the expression needle in the haystack, she's the needle that found me. Sometimes the needle in the haystack finds you. It's a long, involved story, but she sponsors me to go in to these communities and allows me to do a lot of extensive testing. And I'm very positive about the future, but we're going to talk about realities today that you may not be aware of. Normally I avoid videos, but I've got 4 short videos with 12 minutes, and I want to, when you're in person, kind of want to see your reactions to it and things that you think about what really goes on, about what goes on in a disaster, and you just see the government put out everything is safe to see here, everything's fine. It's far different from reality. I also think this is, and I've never been more optimistic in your generation. Unlike my generation, other generations, I think you guys are far less tolerant of the network of what I call the incestuous revolving door and corruption. So I have great confidence in doing everything I can do to help arm you guys with information. And I think it's not a generational thing like people talk about. We live in a day where we're more connected, but we're just disconnected. Like when it comes to AI and all the social media, you cannot, in the government agencies, you cannot sit around in an ivory tower on Zoom. You have to go into communities and listen to people. And that's my point. I believe in using AI, social media to allow me to be more in the ground in the community listening. And the point is, in this environmental work, you have to be on the ground in the community, listening to people, and you have to be crawling around in the contamination and testing for the full spectrum of chemicals. So, if you want to get to the truth. And Pamela Kirkland is here today. All these Pamelas, I've never knew Pamelas, I know too. And I'll make this available afterwards. There's a link. She did a 25-minute interview, sit down, explaining the background and what I do and different testing in communities. And when she ran that story, we got a lot more traction, so in educating the public. So basically, systemic failure from, what I'm going to talk about now, systemic failure from the EPA, other government agencies, federal elected officials across all parties, state elected officials, certain academic institutions, certain nonprofits, class action attorneys, and others. But I've never been more positive about the future. So I don't know how many of you in here are aware that the EPA does not do their own testing when you see them publish something. The responsible parties, polluters, in the case of Conyers Biolab, it was Biolab, that contractors that did the testing. And I want to show, this is an interview, the 3-year anniversary of East Palestine. I want to talk about all these communities. I look at one thing as a gigantic community in all these different places, because they're all basically the same. This is an interview that I did on Saturday on the 3-year anniversary of East Palestine, where the contamination is getting worse. And that is very relevant, whether it's Conyers, Georgia, or any other places.
Independent testing expert and Government Accountability Project EPA whistleblower client in East Palestine. Scott, I appreciate you being here tonight, and I know you say that you've tested this area around East Palestine. What are you finding?
Well, Natasha, thanks for having me. Specifically, we found in August of 2025 that the dioxins, essentially forever chemicals, and I know you've covered other forever chemicals recently, by a factor of 4 or 300% higher. The remediation with the third event has made things much worse by spreading these forever chemicals throughout the whole community.
Are these being found at levels that would harm human health?
Yes. For example, the trigger point on the EPA action level is like 4.8 parts per trillion. We're finding it 5,300 parts per trillion. So that's a measure of what's called the TEQ. So it's very significant, and people are dying in East Palestine and getting very sick.
Yeah, to that end, the community reporting to us health issues like rashes, nosebleeds, respiratory problems since the train derailed. Do you believe that the chemicals that you are finding in this area are connected with those health issues?
Yeah, I am not a toxicologist, but I have been in the homes. I've made 34 trips, 38 rounds of testing, and I can tell you none of these people had these health symptoms before. And Natasha, I want to make a very important point. The EPA does no testing. Most of the media and the public does not understand the EPA serves nothing but as a public relations arm for Norfolk Southern or any other, polluter. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. reached out to me. I sat down in one of the videos you showed with Wyndham Connell with male breast cancer. He sat down in the home, and News Nation has that footage. And he is the one that told me when he sat down that the EPA is captured and corrupt, and they serve essentially as nothing but a public relations arm, and they do no independent testing, and it gets repackaged. So that's very powerful. We didn't know at the time when he sat down that he'd become Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Yeah, are you hopeful at all? Has he said anything to give you hope that he will help after?
Well, we've reached out to him. I think Secretary Kennedy is completely overwhelmed, and we continue to be hopeful to reach out. He made a lot of promises about following up, and I like to remain hopeful that he will follow up and get the CDC involved, because the EPA, again, they do no independent testing. Everything they put out is repackaged from the polluter, from the responsible party, which is a false narrative. They're gamed testing results.
So internal documents obtained by News Nation show that 10 days after telling residents it was safe to return home, the EPA issued an internal memo warning showing that there was a substantial threat to the public and environment. The document warning that there were high levels of hazardous substances or pollutants in the soil around the crash that could migrate elsewhere. We also reached out to the EPA. They replied saying in part, since day one, the Trump administration has prioritized the EPA's role in responding to emergencies, including in East Palestine. They say that VP J.D. Vance traveled there, as well as the EPA's Lee Zeldin, to ensure the safety and the health of people there. What is your message to the EPA tonight?
My message to the EPA is there's systemic failure. Doesn't matter which party's in office, and the EPA needs to actually become independent, and they are basically, there is an incestuous revolving door with the industry basically telling the EPA what to do. The EPA is basically failed, and they're nothing more than a public relations arm. They do have great scientists and experts, but they're not allowed to speak to the public. We have emails from Brian Gullett, a dioxin expert, telling the EPA internally, you're doing the testing wrong for dioxins. If the scientists and the good people at the EPA, if they were allowed to tell the truth, the community would be much better served.
Scott Smith, I appreciate you coming on tonight and just having a bit of this conversation. I wish we had more time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe.
Any initial reactions? Anybody surprised at what you hear about in East Palestine? And it was really exciting talking to Pam today. I didn't realize that she is a court testifying expert. And now you can see how a lot of experts get fooled, because with the EPA, it's basically like the mafia laundering money. They're laundering data and putting it out. And they put out spreadsheets, and I offered in East Palestine and it goes in any community, to sit down with them and share my detailed test reports. And they wouldn't. They canceled the meeting, so they only want to see mine. Why? Because they have untrained people, and it's all going to come out that all their testing is from the contractor data. So the point is about being on the ground. You can see with attorneys trying to get justice, hire well-meaning experts that don't ever go on the ground, and they rely on the EPA data. It's not their fault. In fairness to the EPA and the responsible parties, it's a pretty sophisticated, effectively fraudulent scheme. And also, you talk about the incestuous revolving door. This is Davina Pujara, and subpoenaed me in my driveway, thinking that they'd get me to be quiet. Well, I'm built differently, so I came out as a whistleblower with the Government Accountability Project. And a lot of anonymous people have come out since then. I'm not going to subpoena her in her driveway. I'm just going to tell the world about her. And if you Google her, she cares about social justice. I just want to know how she looks at herself in the mirror. So she subpoenaed me in my driveway, violated all the constitutional rights. The Government Accountability Project, which you've seen in some of the background, provided me with legal support, and we stood up to them, and then they dropped the subpoena. But I'm giving you prime examples of what's wrong. And we talked a little bit about this today, the dioxin levels. And this is when I say certain academic institutions, this is why I'm so excited about Georgia Tech, because you guys get it and Pam gets it, that taxpayer money's coming in. They took, how many residents do you think were affected, Mindy, in East Palestine?
They were all affected.
Well, I mean, with the population, I mean, what is it?
Well, it's not just,
50,000?
there's probably 5,000 to 6,000 in East Palestine, but you're also going up into Pennsylvania and outside of the village of East Palestine. So you probably got about 15,000, 20,000.
So out of 15,000, 20,000, they took 18 blood serum dioxin studies, didn't release where it was or comprised of, and said nothing to see here. So another problem we have is taxpayer funds going into academic institutions, and then that narrative being effectively controlled by the corporations to say nothing to see here. So unfortunately, you've got $10 million of taxpayer funds that have floated in East Palestine, and already they're going to say it's all in your head, it's all PTSD. So this is an example of why you have to, in these situations, get involved and understand what's really going on the ground. And, and then the media covers it, and you see all these PR people getting involved. So now the rest of the world thinks there's nothing to see here. Meanwhile, people are sick and dying. That's why we need all of you to get involved and change this for the better. And the EPA surveilled me, they surveilled the community, and there's a link to all the timelines. And for those of you that are interested, you can see all the facts. This is not conjecture. It's not conspiracy theory, it's fact. It's timeline with all the receipts that lays everything out. So why have I never been more positive? Because of the chemically impacted communities coming together and becoming one gigantic community, along with the people sitting in this room. Because it's going to be your generation that changes things for the better. And people talk about chemically impacted communities. I think it's one big community, because there's where the power of social media. And one of the most incredible things I've been involved in is being able to connect these communities on Facebook. And they're getting a voice, East Palestine to Conyers, Georgia, to Roseland, Louisiana, to Moss Landing, California. You can take all these communities, the mixtures may be a little bit different, but the bottom line is the symptoms are the same, and people are being bombarded with mixtures. And Noah, we were talking about mixtures, and when he was giving me a tour at campus, so you just think about, you take this little pill, you got me thinking, you take this little pill, and some of these pills, you take a glass of wine, and you get, you think about all these effects of combining these chemicals that are really simple. And we're living in a day and age where everything gets presented as a singular exposure to a singular chemical. And then the EPA gets involved with remediation. And I'm going to start leaving these wherever I speak, Pam, so this is for you. Do you guys even know what this is?
I do recognize it, I'm old enough.
This is the way, when I was growing up, this is what we used to communicate. This is what I use. This basically the EPA, when it comes to remediation, is still using paper tellers or rotary phones. Could you imagine me saying I don't want to use this technology, I want to use a rotary phone? That's what I drive at home. And then this is the same thing with safety data sheets, singular exposure to singular chemicals. That's like a rotary phone. So you see the common pattern in Conyers and everywhere is that it's a safe level, but what they're not telling you is synergistic toxicity or how things combine or potentiation. And one of the classic examples is arsenic and PAHs. So when those combine, you get potentiation. It can be very well below the safe level. So that is, a very big deal. And this is the Government Accountability Project, kind of a 3-minute overview. This is why I'm very positive about all these whistleblowers coming out of the woodwork. There are a lot of great people in the world.
downtown safe for residents and allowed them back into their homes.
Back in February 2023, a Norfolk Southern train derailed in East Palestine, Ohio, and caught fire. Dioxins and other dangerous chemicals were being created with the vinyl chloride that was being burned. Norfolk Southern did an open burn. They chose to open burn the train cars on the tracks. And so that created these huge black rolling clouds that went atmospheric.
Newly released emails so that while the Biden administration was telling the public there was nothing to worry about, the White House was internally conversing with FEMA, expressing exactly the opposite.
We ended up suing FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security for this information, and then it finally started trickling in.
We're already seeing cancer clusters, especially liver and thyroid. Government Accountability Project is focused so hard on East Palestine because it was one of the biggest environmental disasters in modern history. It doesn't matter who is currently in office, Democrat or Republican. Unfortunately, we have these agencies that are there to protect the environment. They end up being corporately captured, and they do what is necessary to protect the industry.
You hear me talk about you can't find what you don't look for? If you don't test the creek bags, you can't find anything.
We wouldn't be near where we are in terms of transparency in these campaigns without whistleblowers. We have Robert Crowdell. Dr. Crowdell was an EPA contractor, and he blew the whistle on how the EPA came into East Palestine late. After these huge, tremendous smoke plumes, they missed the plumes entirely and turned off the chemical sensors. Scott Smith is collecting samples in East Palestine and creating that transparency for residents where they've been lied to. Even if you don't live in East Palestine, you think, why should I care, right? Why should I care about what's going on in this little town in Ohio? Because it could be you next. It could be your community, and we have a broken system that is not geared to protect the public. It is such a privilege to work with whistleblowers because you see the best of humanity. They're really a force, and it's just ordinary people that have tremendous ability to create change.
So all this happened in the last week, and that's why social media, if used properly, is the great equalizer. That's why, the government has so far successfully tried to censor, and all these communities coming together, and it's exploding on social media. And last week, I was there for a town hall, and this is me talking to the community, and it's really the people in East Palestine are reaching out to these other communities on social media and literally saving lives. They've connected to the Conyers, Georgia people, and a lot of the people Pam, Hannah Lloyd, and a variety of others. Joe Garcia, they're all talking now.
Thank all of you. It's been one of the greatest honors of my life to get to know all of you and families and do what I can to help. And I want you to know you're not just my heroes. You're heroes from all over the country. I want to tell you the difference you've made. Conyers, Georgia, the bylaw event. You stopped the divide in the community. There were individuals in this town that sold out the community. You prevented that happening in Conyers, Georgia. You are saving lives with what you're doing. Moss Landing, California. You shut down. You shut down the same thing. EPA trolls tried to go into these other communities. You shut them down. You shut down the EPA. Roseland, Louisiana. You have saved lives. You've shut down trolls. You've shut down the false narrative. You've also exposed the truth as to what these class action attorneys are doing, lining their own personal profits, taking advantage of their clients and the victims. I just want to express you guys are saving lives, and you're not just all heroes of mine at the top of the list, all these other communities. And it's been the most humbling honor of my life to do what I can to connect you on social media. Don't stop. Tell your stories. You have the power. Millions of people are coming together. And that's the only way the elected officials, Republicans and Democrats, RFK Jr., who's now Secretary of Health and Human Services, J.D. Vance on the ground.
Right.
The only way is to stay loud and connect all over to these communities. So thank you for motivating me and being a blessing in my life.
Thank you for being on with us, Scott, right?
The powerful thing about that is there's a couple people in that audience that probably won't be here at year end, and it's hard to talk about. They say, I just don't want to see it happen in another community. These are great people, and you see them all over social media. And it's from the ground up the way this is gonna build a movement, and there's no stopping it. So that's kind of important background. I know this is, you're all science majors, but some of what's going on and the reality of the systemic failure, you need to know it's going to help you down the road. And I was even talking to Pam about, working on funding together, and if there's a way that students can accompany me on the ground in some of these things and investigate. We've got so much data now. No one else has this data. So we're able to compare all these communities. For example, the EPA will like to say, you're testing near a roadside, it's going to be background dioxins. Well, I have more tests near a roadside with low dioxins than high dioxins. So they just make false statements to try to say nothing to see here. And now when we talk about biolab, I got on the ground in October of 2024, a few days afterwards, and this is the mapping, and I've sent some of my public presentations around. And one of the things I want to talk about is, and I can pass this around, this is where you get into these acid gases, hydrochloric acid. These were brand new bolts from a resident. The acid gas plume cloud came right over and did this. My question is, if that instantly does that to steel, what does that do to your lungs? And then you're going to hear the argument from, oh, it was just acute exposure, it's not chronic. But once that does that to your lungs, how are you not affected permanently? Those are the questions that need to be answered. And what we're able to do is look at with the arrow, and I do this to protect a lot of people's privacy, and we're able to detect the different hot zones where the high levels. And I was talking to Pam today too about, you get the plume data, and I guess there's a professor here that has got some very valuable plume data, and you've got my data, and then we talked about developing, you guys are working with AI, a model where you can take that plume data and match it up with the data I have on the ground, and then you can take that model backwards. So if I'm finding a certain level of PAHs that's fingerprinted to the plume, you can do the modeling with AI to figure out what people were really exposed to. And this is this is important to get right on the ground. So you see these volatile. The good news about being technical people, I don't have to explain what VOCs and SVOCs are. That's good. So the volatile compounds should not be in the water, but it's the importance of getting there early. The chloroform, the dibromochloromethane, the 4-methyl-2-pentanone, detecting all that stuff and finding it near a dead frog. So then we know what these chemicals are, and then we can combine it with all the data and then run it with AI and do models. And the soot and the ash that rain down on people's properties, again, you've got a dioxin TEQ. The EPA health screening threshold is 4.8. And dioxins are effectively like forever chemicals, very similar to PFAS. They build up in your body and they don't go away. And being able to get the fingerprint and get the ratios and everything. And these are various retains I have from the actual soot and the ash that fell on people's properties. And then what did you have? You had the EPA and Biolab saying, well, we tested for asbestos only, there's no asbestos in it. And Pam, I don't think there was asbestos in the building. I don't know for sure.
They didn't find.
Yeah. So you've seen, you can't find what you don't look for. And it's the same old thing. So it's hard to believe that in all these communities, I'm the only one looking for dioxins, SVOCs, PAHs, and a whole host of other things. And it's actually quite simple when you think about it. I go into a community, I take a shovel, use proper protocols, take a spade, take soil samples, wipe down some surfaces, send it off to a certified lab. It should not be so controversial to track all this violence and all these attacks. It's just insanely simple when you really think about it. And this is some of the other data that we have with the ash and the soot. We analyze it for the metals and everything else. And this is exactly what we're talking about with these mixtures of chemicals and potentiation and synergistic toxicity. And then we went close to the fire, and that's right outside Chris Lovejoy's, as you know, Pam. And you can see the different, the dioxins created. And we just systematically go through and we lay out all this data, but the important part of the research is just beginning to be able to take all this data, map it together, look at it with a plume, and then see what it looks like in a model for what people really are exposed to, because the symptoms are just eerily similar wherever you go in these communities. And dinitrotoluene, trichlorophenol, you see all these, just people are getting bombarded with these mixtures. And it's just the general public and the media, they just don't get it. And they've got there's a reason they have all these PR people at the EPA, they won't let their scientists talk. If they let their scientists talk, the public would know the truth. Because the fact of the matter is you're being bombarded with these mixtures, and then you hold up a safety data sheet and there's a singular exposure to a singular chemical according to OSHA. It's absolute fraud is what it is. Anybody have any questions, comments?
I have a
Yes.
question for you. This was probably pretty early on, maybe the December town hall, like 2 months after the fire. But just to further connect East Palestine to Conyers, you were most concerned, I mean, obviously the amount of vinyl chloride that was part of the open burn in East Palestine was concerning. But when you came here, your initial concern was the volume of the chemicals, but there was something else compared to East Palestine that I can't.
Yeah, I'm glad the chlorinated compounds, we still don't have the chlorinated compounds that burned in Conyers may have exceeded the chlorinated compounds included vinyl chloride. We still don't know that for certain. And Cheryl Garcia is phenomenal. I mean, I've met so many great people. She's a legal nurse practitioner, so she's been very helpful on this. But it may change, but I believe that it may actually turn out to be true that more chlorinated compounds burned in biolab than burned in East Palestine.
Do you have any comments on the brominated compound? Because when we talked to Dr. Hue, who did the analysis, chlorinated compounds are somewhat more stable than brominated one, but there is also a lot more data about chlorine because it was used as a weapon. But there is not that many studies about brominated compound because it's a very unusual exposure. So do you have any feel about those brominated? I saw that you had
I'm glad you said that, because the first thing that struck me, I've done enough testing, is to see the brominated compounds in the volatiles. Mm-hmm. In that creek. I was there 3 days ago, and those are volatile gases still. That's why I wanted to get here fast. But what I call the acid gases, whether it's hydrogen chloride or brominated compounds, I really, some of these, my theory is, and for experts like you to verify at some point, is that people got hit with these mixtures of acid gases.
Oh yeah.
And then they got hit with the PAHs and SVOCs and the dioxins in their soil. So they got hit very hard. I mean, the residents I get calls from it permanently altered them, and now they're sensitive to chemicals that were never sensitive before.
There's no question there was exposure. I think Dr. Hue has definitely measurement for bromine. Now, bromine is not as stable. It does react with light much easier, but it's also much heavier. than chlorine, so it will definitely go lower and stay in the water and be soluble there. So that's why it's interesting. The physical properties of those compounds is also important, and their reactive properties. So really understanding that all holistically is very important, because there is this exposure to multiple things, but there is also different type of exposure based on the physical properties themselves, right?
That's a great point. Yes?
So is most of this data from like right after the incident, or is there more recent stuff?
So there's stuff within 3 days of the incident all the way through May of last year.
Okay.
So it's data because obviously the volatiles will dissipate, and that's what they game. And there is a contractor called CTEH. The one thing in common against all these communities is CTEH. You guys may be. Do anybody know the Showtime series Ray Donovan? Well, Ray Donovan was, if you lived in Hollywood, Pam, are you familiar with Ray Donovan? Yeah. If you lived in Hollywood and you were a movie star and very wealthy, you could murder somebody, get away with anything, you'd call Ray Donovan, he'd clean it and make it go away. CTEH is the Ray Donovan in the environmental industry for the billion-dollar companies. No matter what it is, they can say nothing to see here, false. I know there's a lot of whistleblowers coming forward. I know how they game all the air testing. The first thing they try to do is game the air testing, say nothing to see here. And they have a whole system to create false non-detects. So you'll see the commonality everywhere. So it all starts with the air testing. That's why if I can get on the ground, ideally within 24 to 72 hours when there's an event, and get near the water where there's been, I'll find some VOCs that are still hanging around. But the whistleblowers that are coming out are now have availability to the air testing. And you'll see that Robert Croto came out. The EPA has had a plane called the Aspect plane that is important to Biolab. Well, they shut the sensors off over the creeks in East Palestine. They didn't deploy it the last time here in Biolab. Why? Because you can't find what you don't look for. That plane combined with the ground testing, and this is why I'm now working with these same whistleblowers, and we're developing an integrated system. In a way, I've been like the Marines in the Army, the guy on the ground, but now I have an Air Force behind me. So now we're developing these drones that combine under these. I have some environmental patents too that we're going to file some new patents where if we can get these drones up without the expense of the plane while I'm on the ground, I will be able to call like a command center that will guide me saying the plume's moving this way, Scott, go here. It will dramatically increase efficiency, and it'll eliminate a lot of guesswork. So there's some really great things in development here, right, where you basically have complete congruity now between the air and the water and the soil. And then we do the vent wipes to see what people are breathing, and phthalate compounds, endocrine disruptors, and that's a whole nother thing when it comes to mixtures, the phthalates blending with the metals. There's not a lot of research on that. And what do you have in common at Biolab? What do you have in common at Roseland? What do you have in common at East Palestine? Plasticizers. There's nothing good about plasticizers. It's all the phthalate compounds showing up. And here's an example where Conyers versus East Palestine. So this is the ability with the data we have to go into a disaster and compare it. So this was some residue in Conyers, and then obviously I don't talk about things publicly unless the president or businessman. And this is Chris Lovejoy's, the hood of his car, 752% higher with dioxins that were deposited on their vehicles. And subsequent to that, we have PAH, things inside their building too. One of the big developments is in October of 2025, the CDC formally recognizes Gulf War illness. Until East Palestine, Conyers, Georgia, we didn't have so many events that are equivalent to the burn pits in our vets. And all the vets were dismissed as PTSD, it's in your head. And there are academic institutions that are now saying it's in your head as PTSD that took $10 million of taxpayer funds in East Palestine. That's when I say certain academic institutions are part of the problem too, where there should not be any control over taxpayer funds and grants, and the scientists should be allowed to speak the truth. But this goes a long way as a stepping stone for the vets, because the vets were dismissed, it's in your head. Now there's a CDC's code. The next thing to do is continue to bring all these people together, and that's why I'm so excited about working with you at Georgia Tech, because you have the ability, the forefront, mixtures of chemicals. There's no reason why there can't be standards for mixtures of chemicals. And at a minimum, to dismiss this singular exposure to a singular chemical, just dismissal of people's symptoms that everything is safe. So this is a stepping stone now that there's a diagnostic code for burn pits for the vets. And this is an example why furnace filters matter. I started testing furnace filters instead of doing a biopsy of the lung. You want to really see what the residue on the surfaces are to see what people may have been exposed to. And you know, again, I hear a lot from EPA people. There's 80%, 90% of the EPA people are really good scientists. They're just not allowed to speak. And Brian Gillette, they had a dioxin expert, and this is his own published read, you know, about the particulate matter, 2.5 microns or less. He's done all the research and studies and published that really validates everything I'm saying. I don't need to talk about microns with you guys already get all this stuff. So, and this is you know, and until I got to East Palestine, I didn't realize that, you know, furnace filters really aren't that effective, because for them to really be effective and block the contaminants out, there wouldn't be any airflow. But furnace filters are very effective to see what people may have been exposed to that are reporting health symptoms. And then we have garden crops and residues, and that requires a lot of analysis too, Pam. You know, I literally have so much data, it's how to interpret it and how to analyze it at this point. Even the stuff in the public, I could use all the help in analyzing it. And you know, these are persimmon leaves right after, you know, that had residue, black soot on them right after the biolab event, where people were reporting health symptoms. And these are kind of the mixtures we have of the PAHs.
No, you have a question?
Yeah, so I was gonna ask, with like all the you know, plants and things like that, were you testing stuff on the surface of the plants, or were you testing like the plants themselves, like the
plants themselves?
Okay.
But you ask a good question. So we may want to test this. I mean, I have a special refrigerator in a warehouse, right? So I preserve all these samples, and they're all secured and stored. But there may be some merit in doing some surface. That's a very good point. So this is, and then here's why the EPA plume in East Palestine is very relevant here, and this is why, and Mindy, I think you know, if in case you don't know this, there's a Georgia Tech professor by accident that has plume data. He couldn't make it here today, but me talking to him could be very helpful. This is what the EPA did in East Palestine. This is how they gamed the system. And again, it's not EPA data. It's from a contractor laundered as EPA. So like everybody has to accept it, judges and other experts. And then this is one of the plume maps. This is the truth over here, where it went in East Palestine. So like one of the guys you see in this video with male breast cancer, there might be another one with rare forms of cancer up here that shouldn't happen. So the EPA shows nothing over here, and then we know where it went. So it's all about the gaming of the system. That's why Georgia Tech he just happened to have like sensors.
Yeah, he had the sensor out because for something else, and then he turned on his sensor when the accident happened.
Did he just publish?
No, he's working on the paper. It should be pretty soon. So
Yeah, I was talking to Angela about it yesterday. Yeah, so that he should have that paper published.
Please email me that to me.
But funny enough, I mean, early on, I sent Professor Huey some of your data to have him kind of compare. So you two have spoken, not in person, but your data is commingled in some way.
Well, that's worth a trip for me coming back down to meet with him or talking to him on Zoom or something at some point. And then these are these wind roses, and this came from an expert by the name of Stephen Petty. So you can go back in the data, and this is what we need to do in Conyers too.
This is what he did, right? Is that what he's doing?
Yeah, this is exactly what
he showed us a similar one as well.
Because then we take like the public data that I've done in the town halls, and we take that plume day by day. And you know, the EPA and the billion-dollar companies are masters at taking one day of the windrows and saying, That's it, the most favorable, versus the pattern. You got to look at the wind every day. So, and then Stephen Petty, another expert that actually was an expert with the class action attorneys in East Palestine. And as Pam knows, the class action attorneys hired a PR firm to follow me around the country and try to under myself. The class action attorneys, and then this is where Mindy's going to come in, and then I'm almost time for her point. But he said, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. That's as good as you can't find, you don't look. It's another way of saying you can't find what you don't look for. And with this is East Pal, and after this video, I'm going to let Mindy speak to you about, you know, the attorneys and the class action and how we work together and how she sponsors me and sends me in with no conditions to just try to figure things out. And it really is a complete team effort from all these whistleblowers and everybody else.
So in theory, class action lawsuits are supposed to provide compensation and justice to victims of corporate negligence or malfeasance. But they're notorious for shortchanging those plaintiffs and lining the pockets of the lawyers hired to advocate for them instead. Did something similar happen with the notorious East Palestine train derailment? Well, a whistleblower is now coming forward with claims that the attorneys representing victims in their $600 million lawsuit against Norfolk Southern knew more than they let on. That whistleblower says those lawyers deceived their own clients, alleging that the victims essentially got sold out by their own lawyers who just wanted the case settled. News Nation's Rich McHugh has been leading the coverage on this story since the train derailment happened in February of 2023. Rich, what did you learn?
Hi, Elizabeth. Well, her name is Beth Kozar. She's the sister of the legendary football QB Bernie Kosar. She worked in an independent claims company helping East Palestine residents join that massive $600 million suit against Norfolk Southern. She thought she was helping. Not anymore. Today she says this was all a money grab.
I'm not an anonymous whistleblower.
Among the hundreds gathered inside this recent East Palestine town hall was a woman considering blowing the whistle publicly.
I have tried. I have called our governor. I tried all our representatives. Nobody cares anymore.
Today, Beth Kozar is coming forward.
People who signed up for this lawsuit signed up not knowing all the facts.
Sister of legendary quarterback Bernie Kosar and daughter to the late Bernie Kosar Sr., beloved mayor of Canton, Ohio, Beth Kozar worked for Perfected Claims, a company that said it was working with law firms to provide support for the East Palestine train derailment class action lawsuit.
We let a lot of people down.
Why is Kozar going public now? She says she felt she had to after seeing Austin Druckenbroad's story. He was an otherwise healthy 24-year-old in 2023. Today, he has swelling on his brain. The Cleveland Clinic diagnosed him with reactive airway disease, which they linked to exposure to the chemicals in East Palestine. Austin says his attorney said the deal was simple. Agree to the settlement terms of the class action lawsuit, but keep your mouth shut.
We're going to take care of you. Like, we're going to make sure you get like $3 to $6.8 million and like all of the, and then they told me to like not tell anybody.
Druckenbroad's former attorney, Michael Watts, denied the characterization, saying, I did not communicate with him to stay quiet. If he believed that he had a personal injury claim worth pursuing, we certainly advocated for those clients to simply opt out and continue to pursue the personal injury litigation. But Kozar says Austin Druckenbroad is 100% accurate.
Everybody was pushing to sign the personal injuries. We were told, if you don't want to sign, if you want to opt out, go ahead, but we are not going to represent you because we don't want to upset the judge. You know, I thought some of those attorneys were my friends, and it turns out, you know, I feel like it was a money grab.
Kozar, along with over 200 East Palestine residents, filed a motion in federal court asking to be let out of the settlement based on substantial evidence of fraud and misrepresentation by class counsel.
She knows about the people who were sick. She thought that what she was doing there was for the good of the community. She was betrayed.
Kozar says the cover-up has been worse than the crime.
We're more mad at the government and people that were supposed to protect us.
Now, Kozar is part of that motion with her two sons, who she says are sick, and her late father, Bernie Kozar Sr., who passed away from bladder cancer, which she believes he contracted while in East Palestine. We asked class counsel for comment. Michael Watts, he responded, denied the characterization once again, and said no one from his firm was authorized to speak to clients in that matter. They have yet to respond to the official motion in federal court, and when they do, Elizabeth, it will be up to this federal judge.
Wow, these folks in East Palestine, it just never ends. Rich McHugh, thank you
Never
so
ends.
much.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and down.
Too bad that Austin kept all the text messages, but they don't know that yet. And he got a check for $785 on a case that his attorney signed a declaration that said it was worth $3 to $6 million, and it has changed his entire life at age 24. So I'm Mindy Bish. I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for 33 years. I'm the old lady in the group, the experienced trial attorney. I have spent probably the last year teaching Scott how to talk, because what I will tell you all is it's great to have the science, but if you don't know how to communicate it, you won't get anywhere. So when Scott told you he could call all those chemicals whatever they were, that's because I've been pounding on him to stop talking about it like he's talking to you, and start talking about it like he's talking to me. And I have no idea what all that stuff means, and neither will a jury. Neither will, if you are interviewed, the people on the other side. So let me ask you all a question. Prior to the biolabs fire, how many of you remember what happened in East Palestine? Raise your hand. How many of you paid deep attention to all of it? After the biolabs fire, how many of you dug down into what happened in East Palestine? You know why? Because it didn't happen in your backyard. East Palestine didn't become memorable to you because you never saw it as a threat to you. Biolabs, y'all knew about that the minute it happened, right? Y'all paid attention to that the minute it happened. Why? Because it was in your backyard. And now, all of a sudden, when it happens in Roseland, Louisiana, it perks your interest. Why? Because it has now happened in your backyard. Your task, if you care about pesticides, if you care about these kinds of contaminations, is to find a way to relate that to Ma and Pa with no education like you have, and tell them why they should care if they don't live in Conyers, Georgia. Why should I care about pesticides if I live in the middle of a city where there's very little pesticides being used? Why should it matter to me? And so what you heard from Beth and what you heard from me was one common theme. What was that? Do you remember? It was betrayal. Why? Because we all relate to being betrayed by someone we trust. When did East Palestine start to get attention again? When did Scott start to get attention again? When they started to talk about the fact that the trains run everywhere. Now I'll give it to you as I would talk about it, and just watch what happens to you now over the next few months or years. How many of you have either lived or currently live when you're not in college in an area where trains run? Raise your hands. How many of you have seen freight trains run along those train tracks? Raise your hands. Did you know that those freight trains carry the same chemicals that they blew up in East Palestine? Did you know that? Did you know that a derailment near you, where those train tracks were, could cause the same kind of disaster in your backyard that happened to the people in East Palestine? You start talking about things like that to the people about what matters to you. You start talking about pesticides on food, for example, in Moss Landing. You start talking about that's the breadbasket of the world. And when the Vista battery fire happened, it covered a lot of where the blueberries and raspberries are grown that are probably shipped all over the United States. And I guarantee you now that if you buy raspberries in the store, you're going to check to see where they came from. Did they come from around Moss Landing in California? Because guess what? That area was contaminated. And they're not talking about it. So if you want people to care about what you care about, you have to bring it to their front door. Otherwise, they can't hear you. Because it's human nature. We turn on the TV every day, somebody's getting murdered. Every day, somebody's missing. Every day, horrible things are happening. So what we have to do with the things that matter to us is we have to talk about them in a way that will make them matter to the people who are in the vicinity of where that specific event occurred. And let them know that it is just there by the grace of God go I. And there's nothing wrong with that because it's true. By a roll of the dice, it wasn't your train this time. It was the train in East Palestine. So part of what I do is I take a look so that I can bring these things home, so maybe people will start to pay attention so that it will matter. The other thing I will tell you is, how many of you caught Scott continually calling it the EPA data? He did it a bunch of times. I wanted to stand up and throw things at him every single time he said it. But he did, because it's a habit. There is no EPA data. There is no EPA data.
Isn't it more accurate to say data laundered by the EPA?
No, you still refer to the EPA data on the plume. There's no EPA data on the plume.
No. I'm not.
There is no EPA data. What is published on the EPA site all comes from someplace else. They don't put them out there. Call it words matter when you're describing what you find. Words matter. So let me tell you about some of the folks in biolabs, because some of you have been involved in that. Yes, I heard you say? Okay. Cheryl Garcia, who has her biolabs voice now. It'll never be the same. She takes all kinds of medications every day that she never had to take before. I have another client who cried because her voice has been so changed that she cannot sing in church anymore because she coughs too much, so she can't sing. And it's devastating to her. We have women who, as most of you know, these chemicals, what do they affect a lot of? Mucous membranes. Unfortunately for women, what are our whole reproductive system made out of? Mucous membranes. You have all kinds of women bleeding harder, bleeding longer, being told it's just, oh, you're 40, you're going through premenopause. Me and 300 other women I know, all at the same time, all right after biolabs. Extreme cramp, pain, difficulty getting pregnant. Fear of getting pregnant. What will this do? Has my body changed? We have a gentleman who was on the golf course when the plume came over, could not get off fast enough. He now sleeps sitting up every night. His wife usually stays close by, because if he has a coughing spell, she needs to be close by to give him an inhaler so he doesn't choke on his own spittle, basically. And that's how his life has changed. We have somebody else who had pre-existing heart disease, but he had had a surgery, he was doing fine, and now his heart's deteriorating again, right after biolabs. It has changed people's lives. We have a couple of children who have now gotten repeated strep throats that don't go away with medication. That's not a good sign for a child. That we have had to send over to the ABIT clinic to have their brain scans done and to have them looked at. We have a couple of kids who've regressed in school because children's brains process toxins differently than adults do. And people, we have one woman who has MS. She's my hero for what it is that she does. But her MS has gotten worse, of course. And she can't get out of her house, so we're trying to make homeowners claims for her as she deteriorates a little bit. But then again, she's out there being of service to everyone else. Worried that she had clothes for grandparents who were raising their grandchildren, and did she give them these clothes and were they contaminated? Almost brought her to tears. These are the real life people that are out there, and they depend on good, solid data. Because what these other people do, and I think I'm close to my time, I think, is without your good data, they lose every time. Every single time, they pull up the bad data and they say, nobody could have been made sick by this. It's all in your head, or you would have gotten it anyways. Go away. And they bury it and nothing happens. So your good data. C-Tech pays really well, guys. They'll pay you a small fortune to go and help them stand by a door and take an air sample with windows and doors open in a house so that you can dilute the sample. You'll have choices to make in your lives doing what you do, because they'll pay you a lot to not pay attention and pretend these people don't matter. So I invite you. I'm going to be in East Palestine. I believe it's the week of March 23rd. And I'm going to do a town hall with my clients. These are the real people who are really sick. I'd be happy to take a few of you with me to Ohio so you can see the real people who are really affected. I can't go into East Palestine. I'm 66 and I keep getting sick every time I go in, and I promised my family I would not go anymore unless I absolutely had to. But I can taste the chemicals in the creek beds. You want to take a field trip? I'll pay your airfare. Come on down. We're going to do a town hall with biolabs. Come and join us. See the people. We're gonna do a town hall in Roseland. Join us. I'll pay your airfare. Before you make choices about what you do with what you learn, know the people that will be affected by the choices that you make when you decide what to do with your skills. That's all I ask of you. Because they'll pay you a lot of money to be quiet. A lot of money. And I hope if I show you the people, I have high hopes for your generation. I have a 29-year-old of my own. You are supposed to be the generation who looks at it all and say, you had your chance. Look what you did. We're going to do it right. And you are going to be our future, or your kids will have no place to live. So if any of you are interested and you want to see the real people and you want to take a little ride down into East Palestine where it's still contaminated and see it for yourself, you just reach out to me or Scott. I can't take all of you, but I can take a few. And that is my offer. Meet the people so you know who you're doing it for. And that is all I got. Thank you.
So we are out of time, but thank you, both of you, very much. We appreciate it. We will follow up.